Welcome to Fabricland. Today we're going to do a tour of the inside, how to purchase a pattern, how to read the pattern front and back, and know exactly what you need to make your projects. So let's get started. So this is where you're going to come to look at what kind of patterns Fabricland has. We have three main pattern companies. We have McCall's, Berta, and Butterick. Those are the three companies that are a little more user-friendly if you're a beginner. They also have Vogue patterns, but Vogue patterns are more rated for an intermediate kind of sewer, but also available for you. So if we look at a pattern book for the first time, it comes with sort of a legend down the front. So if you have no idea what you want to make, you have all these sort of categories: dresses, tops, jackets, sleepwear, crafts, all sorts of things. Let's say we wanted to go to the jacket section. We would turn it to that mustardy kind of color here, where it says vests and jackets. You can browse through all the jackets that they have to offer. I like this one here because it also has an easy sign. So again, those are things, if you're starting out, you want to look for a pattern that has the easy on it versus one that's more like a tailored jacket. And once you've decided that this is the sort of cardigan that I want to make, I want to take note of the actual pattern number. So this number that's on the pattern book here starts with an M for McCall's, M7332. That's what you'd want to write down so that the cashier would pull it for you. So they have these little pieces of paper where you can grab and write down the pattern number on. So I'd take a pencil, I'd write McCall's 7332, and then I would go to the cashier and say I would like McCall's 7332, and she would pull it from all these sort of filing cabinets that aren't facing us, but it faces them, so that you can get the correct pattern. She will ask you what size bracket you want, so you're going to want to know your size. They come in 6 to 14 and then 14 to 22, so make sure that you know your measurements so you can get the correct size bracket, because patterns are not returnable. So once you've pulled a pattern, so for this one, direct pattern actually sitting here, and this one comes from extra small, small, and medium. It has its pattern number on top, B6569, and it has the different views jackets on the front. Oftentimes, they'll have the stylized sort of views on the front, and then when you flip them over, they have the technical drawings, so you can see more accurately where the seams fall, if they have a zipper, all those sorts of things. Another thing you want to look for, again, on the backs of the envelopes, if they didn't say the easy on the front, could be a guide. So on these Vogue patterns, for instance, they have easy, average, and advanced on the back. So again, you can pick a pattern that best suits your skill level. Again, I want to kind of make sure you understand how many patterns are available. Like, they have things, all sorts of things. You can have fun with patterns. I like to kind of show their stuffies and dog jackets. And then you can sew, everything from summer, spring collections to really evening gowns in these books. So lots and lots of variety. Now, the company, again, really doesn't matter as long as you're sort of looking at those guides on being easy or not. When you get the envelope, you want to flip it over, because most of the good information, all the good stuff, is on the back of this envelope. For this one, when you look, it's going to tell you kind of a description of what it is. So for instance, this is a loose-fitting jacket, has a front separating zipper, pockets, collar, drawstring, and a contrast variations if you choose to do that. Then when you go down a little bit more, it will say suggested fabrics. So it's asking you for like interlock jersey, rib knit, sweatshirt fleece, anything with 35% cross grain stretch. And if you're wondering, well, what's 35% stretch? There is a little stretch test on envelopes oftentimes that require a knit fabric. And so what you would do is you would lay your fabric on there, 4 inches of your cross-folded knit, and you would stretch it to that line. And if it stretches no problem and does not distort the knit, it's acceptable. It would be good, because then it has enough stretchability in it so that you move, it will fit correctly like it was designed. So those are important things to look at. This guy, it has, a bunch of different views that come with this pattern. This pattern has sort of a dress. You can wear it with contrasting back yokes, contrasting skirt bottom. It tells you again if it's loose fitting or fitted. So this one says it's a fitted dress with body darts, asymmetrical button front closure, back yoke for forward shoulder seams, sleeves, neckline, and fabric variations. Okay, so it gives you always a description of what the pattern will look like or what you're buying. Suggested fabrics, cotton blends, poplin, crepe, and taffeta. In a second, I will show you where we can find some of those fabrics, but you definitely want to stick to what they suggest so that you are pleased with how the actual pattern turns out. Okay, they give those for you for a reason. Another really important part on the back of the envelope is those measurements. So when we look at the backs, they're sometimes hiding in the little flap, but they all have these measurement charts. So oftentimes you need to come in knowing your bust, waist, and hip measurements, and that you can find the closest bracket. Now that doesn't mean you've cut out your pattern yet, but that will at least give you a good idea of the yardage needed. If I was gonna be a size 12, then I know when I come in here, I could go down the size 12 for whatever view I want to make, and it will tell me how much fabric I need. So the middle section is telling me exactly how much fabric I need. The English side is in yards and the French side is in meters, and Fabricland likes to cut in meters, so you'll get really good at reading French. Another section that's often missed is interfacing. So interfacing, we use that for collars, cuffs, waistbands, front facings, anything that needs a little more structure and stabilization. So for this one, you would need it for the collar and definitely where your button and buttonholes will be made, but it's kind of off to the side. So on this one, under view A, the fusible interfacing is mentioned, but then B, C, and D, there's nothing really talking about interfacing. Ah, look at that, they print it below it. So fusible interfacing B, C, and D. So just watch and really take a closer look, because they print them in funny locations, I find, on the back of the envelope. But oftentimes it is missed, and it is a really important part that you'd want to get to make your garment. Lastly, we have notions. So notions are anything extra that you'll need to create your garment. So things like buttons, bias tape, if you needed elastic, cording, all those sorts of things make the view that you want. So for this one, notions would be 10 half-inch buttons. Only for A, it needs one package of half-inch single-fold bias tape. And we'll do a tour of where you find the notions in the store. On this guy, notions would be a 28-inch separating zipper so that you can do up your jacket, and it tells you exactly the length that you're looking for. And separating is a key word there because it needs to come apart so that you're not climbing into your hoodie. At the very, very bottom, this is sometimes, it's important when we actually cut out your pattern. It's the finished garment measurements, and they differ from the measurements up here. So for instance, the bust at a size 6 says 30.5. And at the finished measurements at bust for a size 6, it says 34.5. So this pattern has 4 inches of ease. Ease is that extra that we need to move around when we wear garments so it's comfortable. And so these are a more accurate indication. So depending on how you like your garment to fit, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can actually bump down a size because the pattern company gives you too much ease. And every pattern company and independent designer puts their own amount of ease in. So they're not a standard set amount of ease. So that's kind of neat to see how fitted your garment's actually going to be when sewn. So those are great to know when we actually start laying out a pattern. But for fabric yardage and just buying fabric, I would go off of these and then look down based on your view, how much fabric you would need. One last thing, when you look, there's 2 measurements. Well, all of them, you see an amount for 45-inch and an amount for 60-inch. So fabric comes in 2 widths. You don't need them both, but let's just say you bought a cotton. A cotton is a 45-inch wide fabric. You tend to need more of it. So if I was gonna follow it to the meter side, because that's what fabric cuts in, and I'm a size 6, I'm doing view A, I would need 2.2 meters of cotton in a 45-inch, okay? But if I found a taffeta and it's 150 centimeters or 60-inch wide, I would only need 1.6 meters. Okay, so it's one or the other, depending on the width of your fabric. If you were unsure, you could always ask the lady that cuts the fabric how wide your fabric is, and then you would know which amount to get cut. This is sort of how to read the patterns. Again, on the front, you have the company, the pattern number, the size bracket, and the different views included in it. And on the back of the envelope, you have your measurements, You have the description of what you're going to be sewing. You have the suggested fabrics, so you know which fabrics you're going to look for. You have all the yardage amounts, so based on your size, how much fabric you need to go get. You have interfacing amounts where you would have to go get for collars and such, notions, those extras to complete your garment, and your finished actual measurements after sewing. So that's sort of the back of the pattern in a nutshell. Okay, so I have a bunch of different patterns with different notions. So we're gonna hit up the notions next so you get an idea of what you're looking for. So come on this way. So as you can tell, Fabricland has quite the selection of notions. So here we have things like bias tape. So when we look at bias tape, they come in single fold and double fold. So when you look onto here, the package will tell you single fold wide. Oftentimes though, lots of times fabric will call for double fold extra wide. That's a really common one, but don't be fooled just to pick up the right color. Give it a really good check to see that you got the correct actual type of bias tape. But these are great for finishing off necklines, a detail to finish off edging. Bias tape has lots of purposes. Then we have things like piping, okay? That's great for maybe in home decor around cushion edges. So you have a thick sort of piping edge, you know, pre-ruffles. We have webbing and strapping, cording for maybe drawstrings on hoodies. Different widths of elastic. So lots of times if you have a pull-on pant, like a PJ pant, it will call for maybe 1 inch wide elastic. So your elastics are here. All sorts of button selection. So that, I'm gonna pull out my button dress because it says 10 half-inch buttons. Okay, so I don't wanna be getting ones that say 7/8 of an inch. They'll be too big. So you wanna make sure that you're buying the ones and the size that they're asking for. So there's lots and lots of selection here that you could look for and make sure that you find actually a 1/2 inch button for. I'm gonna just take you to the zipper section because lots of times patterns call for an invisible zipper. So for instance, in this dress, it's calling for an invisible zipper. And in the sort of hoodie pattern, it's calling for a separating zipper. So let's go to zippers. Let's show you the difference. So if you're not sure, I mean, they are labeled there. Those are invisible zippers, but how you really can tell from sort of a dress zipper, so I'm just gonna pull this one, do an invisible zipper, is that on a regular dress zipper, the teeth and the pull are on the same side, okay? They're also more of a heavy twill sort of zipper tape, but mainly look for that the teeth and the pull are on the same side as a regular zipper. And on an invisible zipper, the pull and the teeth are on opposite sides. These invisible zippers here are a little bit lighter weight on their zipper tape. It looks kind of like a mesh, but the main difference is that the teeth and the actual pull are on opposite sides. So this dress called for an invisible zipper, so I'd want to make sure I got the correct length and the correct zipper. Whereas the separating zippers are over here. And so this one called for a 28-inch separating zipper. Here's all the different lengths. It also says separating on there, one way. There's some that are two-way separating. They're oftentimes a bit heavier in weight, but essentially they come apart at the bottom. So when I put this in, I can actually take it apart. That's what a separating zipper is. Okay, so making sure that you read your notions carefully is really important so that you have the right stuff for the view that you're using. So another thing I pointed out on the back of the envelopes is interfacing. So it was this guy, the dress that was calling for interfacing, and it even said fusible. So fusible means iron on. So let's go take a look at the interfacing so we understand what fusible is. So this is your interfacing section. And so when they're asking you for fusible interfacing, you're looking for something with almost like little bumps. So for instance, this guy is a non-woven fusible. And so if you look really closely, you can see these sort of bumps on the back. They're the glue. That's what fusible means, iron on. So you can kind of feel it, or sometimes it has just a sheen. You'll see a shiny surface to it. That's a fusible interfacing. That's a non-woven, it doesn't have threads. It's not my favorite. I recommend woven. fusible. So see, again, you can see the bumps, but this actually has threads. So woven means it's made up of weaving, and so it will resemble more fabric when you fuse it to your fabric. Whereas I feel a non-woven interfacing starts to turn your fabric into almost like a cardboard texture. So for garments, I really recommend the fusible woven, and you want to get it in the correct weight. So you don't want your interfacing to overpower your fabric. So if you picked a lightweight fabric, you want a lightweight interfacing, and it will tell you on these side edges what weight it is. You can also feel it compared to the other ones. If you picked a medium weight sort of fabric, and they can go range all the way down to fusible sort of fleeces for crafts sort of projects where they're quite heavy. Another thing to point out is when you're using a stretch fabric, you don't want to make it with a woven interfacing, because a stretch fabric still needs to have some stretch and give. So they have knit interfacing as well. So making sure that your interfacing always matches the quality of the outside fabric so that you'll be happy with the final results. They have sew-on interfacing, so it doesn't have the bumps, like right here. It's good, and it has its purpose, especially if your fabric does not like the heat of the iron or a pile will get crushed. I don't recommend it for beginners because you have to sew it all the way around your edges, and it's more chance that it would sort of bubble or not sit as flat. Whereas fusible and that iron-on is easy, it's user-friendly, it's great for beginners. So if your fabric can tolerate it, definitely always pick a fusible interfacing. You'll be a lot happier with the results.